studied about their habitat, okay, variety of habitats where the algae are generally aquatic, but they are also be seen on some unusual habitats. For example, growing up on a sloth bear, okay, sometimes they can also be seen in stones, okay, but in usual habitat they are generally seen in the aquatic habitats. They can also be seen in ponds, they can also be seen in their marine habitat, they can also be seen in fresh water. In fresh water you can see some flowing rivers are present, and sometimes the stagnant pond is also present. So to survive in the flowing river, so that they won't be flow out, that's why they have a modification, that is hold fast, so that they can attach to a substratum, which is by the help of hold fast. So now look into their structure. Now look into their structure. Their structure is also very vast, because as you know that algae can be also unicellular according to their cell count. They can also be unicellular, they can also be multicellular. If you will look into their thallus structure, okay, thallus organization, thallus structure of algae, it is also very vast, okay. So their thallus can also be unicellular, also motile as well as non-motile. Some unicellular motile forms are also present. Example, your Chlamydomonas. Why it is motile? Motile means they can move, okay. They can go from one place to another by the help of a locomotory organ, that is flagella. So it is a unicellular algae. Chlamydomonas is a unicellular algae. Chlamydomonas is a unicellular algae, okay. As you can see, they have a ovoid structure, they have two flagellas, and flagella are their motile organ. So they can, it is an unicellular algae, gote unicellular algae eta, gote single celled algae eta. So jehetu they have the flagella, that's why they can go from one place to another. So good example hochi tamara thallus dekhibo, je structure algae ro tame dekhibo, variety of tame dekhibo algae dekha jibe, okay. तो ता भीतर गोटे होछि तमरो unicellular motile रे Chlamydomonas, another it can be unicellular non-motile. Example, for example, your chlorella, for example, your chlorella, okay. There can also be filamentous forms, and filamentous forms can also be branched as well as unbranched. Unbranched, okay. Unbranched example here, Odogonium example, okay. And branched forms are also present, okay, in algae. For example, your Coleochaete, okay. So as we can see in algae, okay, we can see unicellular motile forms are also present, unicellular non-motile forms are also present, okay. There are some algae, they are filamentous, okay, filament like structures they have, that's why they are called filamentous. For example, if you will study about Spirogyra or Oedogonium. So each cell look like a filament, that's why that is called filamentous structure, okay. And that is unbranched, branching hai na tha, gote single gote rahila stalk bhaliya rahila, so they do not have a branch, that's why they are unbranched structure. And sometimes in algae we can see branches, that's why they are branched structure. There are also some algae who live in groups, okay, who survive forming a group, those are called colonies. And for example, your volvox. So colony form is completely different from a multicellular form, because in multicellular we see a group of cells are coming together to form a specific function, but in colonial form generally the algae they come together in a mucilaginous structure, okay, which is called a volvox, गोटे जेली लाइक स्ट्रक्चर, गोटे mucilaginous structure अंडर से आसती. फॉर एग्जांपल volvox को कंसीडर कर दियो. देख जनरली एटा गोटे volvox हो गले, ग्रीन एल्जी हो गले, ग्रीन एल्जी हो गले से माने ओके volvox. ओके okay. Okay, these colonies are completely different of multicellular form, because in multicellular form a group of cells are combined together to form a specific function, but here completely a lot of volvox. Here it is a volvox, here it is a volvox. So here you can see in this picture a lot of volvox, they are come under, okay, they group together in a mucilaginous structure or a jelly like structure by forming colonies. Okay, आउ तुम क्लामाइडोमोनास रे देखुथिलो से सिंगल थिला, सॉलिटरी थिला. Okay, for example if you will see in oedogonium they are also solitary structures. Generally किछटा algae हमको एमती देखा जाती, they are in solitary form, but there are also some algae who live in a colonies. Okay, जेम तमे देखुथियो colony form करके रहुचो सेमती, they sometimes the algae also form colonies in a mucilaginous structure or jelly like structure. Okay, so these are called colony forms of algae. It is an example is volvox. Filamentous forms are also present. For example is your oedogonium, for example in your spirogyra. Okay, here in spirogyra तमे देखुथिबो each cell कौन देखा जाउची, गोटे फिलामेंट टाइप रो देखा जाउची. स्पाइरोगाइरा को तमे एटा होची कोन स्पाइरोगाइरा गोटे एल्जी, इट इज मल्टी सेलुलर. तमे देखो एथरे बहुत सारा सेल अछंती, ई गोटे सेल, दिस इज अनदर सेल, दिस इज अनदर सेल, and we can easily say that this is a multicellular organism, and in each cell you will see each cell is looking like a filament. Okay, gote cell tamara kon hochi, each cell is looking like a filament, that's why it is called filamentous structure. So there are some filamentous forms are also present. For example your spirogyra, eulothrix. Okay, eulothrix, spirogyra. Okay, clear. So filamentous forms of algae are also present. A few of the marine forms such as kelps form massive plant bodies. तमे समुद्र भितर देखिबो एमती देखिबो, केतल तमे डिस्कवरी चैनल देखिथिबो, सेथरे देखौथिबे मैराइन हैबिटेट रे मैराइन ऑर्गेनिजम्स देखौथिबे, फिश थिबे ता धरे सी ऑर्गेनिजम्स देखौथिबे, सी हॉर्स देखौथिबे, तमे सब ता भितर देखिबो एमती बहुत सारा एमती शैवाल लाइक बहुत बड़ बड़ सब मैसिव स्ट्रक्चर भी तमे देखियो पाउछ. दे आर जनरली नॉट प्लांट्स और ट्रीज, यू माइट बी थिंकिंग, बट दे आर जनरली द algae. Okay, massive algae. For example तांकर kelps देखिलो, it is one type of brown algae. This is kelps, brown algae. Okay, now look into their cell structure. Okay, now look into the cell structure of algae. Now look into the cell structure of algae. So when we are studying about algae, we can easily study about their external structure and another is their internal structure. Their external structure, we saw their thalassomes, that they might be filamentous, they might be seen in colonies, they might be seen in which form, that is your branched form, unbranched form. Generally it means their morphology, how they we can see them from their physiology, from their morphology background. मतलब तांकर फिजिकल फीचर सब कौन रोचे से माने ताकू देखि कि हम कंसीडर कर परबा, इट इज देयर एक्सटर्नल स्ट्रक्चर और मॉर्फोलॉजी. बट सेल स्ट्रक्चर असला माने तांकर सेल डिटेल्स पढ़ी जाउछ हम. सो सेल स्ट्रक्चर इट कैन आल्सो बी डिवाइडेड इनटू टू टाइप्स, दैट इज एक्सटर्नल स्ट्रक्चर, थालो स्ट्रक्चर जनरली हम तांकर देखुछु, बट इंटरनल स्ट्रक्चर रे तांकर आमे सेल डिटेल्स पढुछु. We are studying about their cell details. External structure, we saw that they might be unicellular, they might be multicellular, they might be remain in colonies or solitary form, they can be seen in colonies, they might be branched, unbranched, filamentous, but here we will study about their cell details. Okay, generally algae is classified upon their pigments into three types. One is green algae, brown algae, and another is red algae. Okay, green algae, brown algae, and red algae. When we study the cell details of algae, we generally divide algae into three categories. One is green algae. Another is brown algae. Another is red algae. In cell details of the algae, we generally study about their specific structures. Algae तार cell structure माने गोटे normally eukaryotic रो cell structure जहाँ थिबो से मानकर भी cell structure सेया थिबो. Eukaryotic cell माने कौन थिबो? Nucleus थिबो, mitochondria थिबो, endoplasmic reticulum थिबो, chloroplast थिबो. They are plants, they are autotrophs. It means they can synthesize their own food. That means they have a photosynthetic organelle which is chloroplast. Okay, clear? So chloroplast भी थिबो, they have the chloroplast. But difference कौन रहउची? जो difference टा रहे जोटा कि गोटे algae रो आ गोटे algae को अलगा करे आमे सेटा को ही पढू cell details रे समानकर. What are the difference? Generally मैं difference टा को study करू. Okay, पढू. So in which basis they differ? For example, they are cell wall. For example, they are chlorophyll or pigment. You can say, we will won't say here chlorophyll, pigment. Okay. Another we can study about their flagella. Another is their reserve food material. तो यही तांकर सेल स्ट्रक्चर बेसिस रे माने डिफर करंती आ एटा को ही हमें पढू. ओके, एथ्रु ही तांकर क्वेश्चन आसे. And when we will look into the cell wall of the algae, when we will look into the three types of the cell wall of the algae, as they are plants, they have cell wall. Okay, they are plants, it means around their cell they have a specific envelope like structure which is cell wall, and their cell wall, as like we have studied in the 5 kingdom system of classification, plant cell wall is made up of cellulose, as like bacterial cell wall is made up of peptidoglycan, fungal cell wall is made up of chitin. So plant cell wall is made up of cellulose. As algae come under the plants, so their cell wall is also made up of cellulose. But in different types of algae, they have another substance also, okay, around their cell wall. For example, if you will consider about algae, okay, if you will consider about green algae, so it is green algae cell, it is brown algae cell, it is red algae cell. So they have a protective covering which is cell wall, which is made up of cellulose. So I made a cell wall which is made up of cellulose, Here in brown algae, it has also cellulose. In red algae, it has also cellulose. But in green algae, apart from the cellulose, they have another substance which is your pectin. Another substance which is pectin. So here their cell wall is composed of cellulose plus pectin. In brown algae, they have cellulose as well as algin, another chemical substance which is algin. Tankara cell wall boundary पाखे भी आहरी आ गोटे सब्सटेंस भी रोचे जोटा कि सेलुलोज को छाड़ी देले भी सेटा रोचे आल्जिन आ गोटे सब्सटेंस भी तांकर रोचे प्रेजेंट रोचे आल्जिन वन इज सेल्युलोज अनदर इज आल्जिन प्लस आल्जिन red algae भी सेमती in red algae also apart from the cellulose you will see another substance which is carrageen and polysulfate ester carrageen and polysulfate ester cellulose तो present रहिला plus carrageen plus polysulfate ester sulfate ester when you will look into their pigment ग्रीन algae रे क्लोरोफिल पिगमेंट रोची ता सहित क्लोरोफिल ए क्लोरोफिल बी रोची क्लोरोफिल पिगमेंट रोची दे हैव क्लोरोफिल पिगमेंट ब्राउन algae रे भी क्लोरोफिल रोची ओके रेड algae रे भी क्लोरोफिल रोची बट आई विल टेल यू अबाउट द डिफरेंट पिगमेंट व्हाई दे अपीयर ब्राउन फ्यूकोजैंथिन and here in red algae they have also the chlorophyll they have here also chlorophyll present if they do not have chlorophyll they won't be able to synthesize their food okay they have the chlorophyll but they have another pigment which appear brown fucoxanthin in red algae they have the chlorophyll but there is another pigment for which they appear red in color which is phycoerythrin if they won't have the pigment chlorophyll then they won't be able to synthesize the as you know that chlorophyll is responsible for capturing the sunlight and they help in photosynthesis so they have chlorophyll pigment but the number of the red pigment is high okay which is phycoerythrin that's why they appear red in color phycoerythrin okay let's talk about their flagella in green algae you will see apical flagella is present apical see this is anterior part this is posterior part in anterior part when you see flagella it is called apical flagella so here you will see two flagella apical flagella and if you will see flagella in this part this is called lateral flagella okay in this part this is called lateral and here you will see both the flagellas are equal in green algae you will see both the flagellas are equal of equal length so here equal flagellas are present equal but in brown algae the flagella position is lateral but they might be unequal okay they might be unequal one is longer one is shorter so lateral unequal but in red algae they do not have flagella they are not motile okay here in brown algae green algae motile algae are present but in red algae they generally flagella are absent they are non-motile no flagella let's talk about reserve food material so here green algae reserve food material is starch brown algae laminarian starch red algae Floridian starch okay clear so these are the basic differences or these are the basic differences of in their cell structures we see in various types of algae okay clear algae their cell wall generally composed of cellulose as they are plants they have plant cell wall so their cell wall is composed of cellulose and their reserve food material is generally starch in green algae you will see starch but in brown algae you will see laminarian starch in red algae you will see Floridian starch in addition to chlorophylls and carotenoids some algae contain special pigments that is phycobilins okay let's look into their reproduction so algae can reproduce vegetative asexual as well as sexual methods I already have told you that in lower organisms we generally don't define or we generally don't distinguish the reproduction into two types asexual and sexual as they are completely development or cell reproduction is completely different from the higher organisms. So generally we study their reproduction into three categories. One is vegetative, asexual, sexual. So three categories we study in reproduction. In vegetative, for example, this is Spirogyra. For some reason, for example, if a predator arrives here, predator arrives here, and it pass through this. Okay, एटा ये अच्छी बोली थोड़ी ना ये तार ट्रैक चेंज करके सेपटे देकी जीवो, बट प्रेडेटर अच्छी माने से किसी भी कारण कौन हम से तार जीव ही जीव एपटे ही जीव से. If a predator arrives here and it passes through the Spirogyra or the red algae, so for some reason it breaks. Okay, and when it breaks into two filaments, okay, each filament has the potential to completely form another complete parent structure or Spirogyra structure. So this type of process is called vegetative process. Vegetative reproduction process. So this type of process is called vegetative reproduction process. देखो वेजिटेटिव कम पे कहा गला को देखो गोटे सिंगल जमती तुम देखुछ वेजिटेटिव गोटे सिंगल वेजिटेटिव पार्ट रू कंप्लीट कौन हो जाउची ना प्लांट टा तैयारी हो जाउची. व्हाई इट इज कॉल्ड वेजिटेटिव रिप्रोडक्शन प्रोसेस? देखो कहीं ना इट इज ऑल्सो कॉल्ड फ्रैगमेंटेशन. It means a single fragment. Of Spirogyra. A single fragment of Spirogyra has the potential to completely make a new plant. That's why this is called fragmentation of Spirogyra or vegetative reproduction of Spirogyra. Okay, clear. देखिबो एटा केमती हुए and how this process happens in by some water currents, or by predators. किछि गोटे देखिबो predator pass करी गला कि by some water current हे गला, water current द्वारा their filament break करी गला. So it will that complete fragment or that filament will completely develop into another plant, another Spirogyra. So it is a vegetative reproduction of Spirogyra. So another type of reproduction process, that is asexual reproduction process, can also be seen in algae, that is asexual reproduction. Asexual. So A means what? A means without. Asexual means without involvement of sex organs. So they do not need another parent for their reproduction process. They individually are self-sufficient to produce the complete another plant. So individual parent is responsible for their daughter cells. So in this asexual reproduction process, it occurs by the production of different types of spores, the most common being the zoospores. Okay, I will come into this. Okay, generally asexual reproduction process is carried out by spores, and those spores can be motile or those spores can be non-motile. Generally the asexual reproduction process is done by spores, but those spores can be motile or those spores can be non-motile. Okay, if they are motile, so they will be zoospores. Why zoo? Zoo means animal. Animal मानकर कौन थाए ना लोकोमोशन पावर टा थाए. जेतबेले तुम फर्स्ट मु तुमको पढ़ाई थी in first class I have told you about the characteristics of a living being as well as non-living being. I have told you that animals or the living organisms have a character to locomote, okay, to go from one place to another for any process. For example, of their reproduction, for example nutrition, for example consumption. So they can move from one place to another. They have a characteristics or power to move or an ability to move. So as some spores are motile, as some spores have flagella, the locomotory organ in their cell, that's why some spores are called as zoospores. Here you see a spore, they have the flagella, or locomotory organ, that's why they can swim in water. Swim kari paranti water re semane, they can swim in water as they have flagella, so they are called zoospores. But there are also some spores who do not have flagella, they are non-motile. Okay, as they do not have flagella, to semane move kari paribeni, they are non-motile. So those type of spores are called as aplanospores. It means they are non-motile. Clear? Generally asexual process is carried out by two types of spores. One spore is your zoospore. Zoospore means is your motile spore. So those spores, they can be motile as well as they can be non-motile. Motile means they have zoospores and non-motile means they have aplanospores. So generally their reproduction or asexual reproduction is carried out by spores, and these zoospores appear in their favorable habitat, in their favorable condition. And these aplanospore appear in their unfavorable condition. Favorable means what? As they are aquatic, as they are water organisms, so rainy season is favorable for them, so water habitat is favorable for them. Favorable means when they have the particular condition to reproduce. Okay, it means semanka pakhare food available achi, it means they have a particular habitat, a favorable habitat, so they can reproduce. So in those conditions zoospores will produce, but in unfavorable condition aplanospores will produce. Clear? So this is the sexual reproduction of algae. Let's look into this is the asexual reproduction of algae. Let's look into their sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction of algae. We studied their vegetative reproduction, we studied their asexual reproduction. Let's look into their sexual reproduction. In vegetative reproduction, we see that they can also be reproduced by fragmentation process. In asexual reproduction, we see that they reproduce by spores, and those spores can also, and those spores, they might be zoospores or they might be your aplanospores. Those spores, they might be motile, so as they have flagella, so they are called zoospores, and those spores, they might be non-motile, so that's why they do not have flagella and they are called aplanospores. And zoospores, they generally produce in favorable conditions, and the aplanospores, they generally produce in unfavorable conditions. Sexual reproduction. Sexual means the involvement of, what is sexual reproduction? The involvement of sex organs or the involvement of gametes. Sexual reproduction means involvement of sex organs or gametes. Sexual reproduction means what? Involvement of sex organs or gametes. So generally gametes are produced, and those gametes they can also be three types: isogametes, anisogametes, oogametes. Isogametes, or in isogamy, generally the gametes are morphological. In isogamy or in isogametes, generally the gametes are morphologically similar. Morphologically similar. But in anisogamous, what happened here? What is here? Asexual, means without. Okay, so in anisogamous means the gametes are completely unequal. Okay, completely unequal. Here male might be larger or female might be larger. So the gametes are unequal in size. In oogametes, generally the female is larger one. Male smaller one, female is larger one. Okay, female is larger one. Female gamete is larger. Gamete larger. Okay, larger. Female gamete larger. Okay. So in sexual reproduction process, we see the gametes, involvement of the gametes, and those gametes, they can also be three types, that it can be isogametes, it can be anisogametes, it can be oogametes. So it can be isogametes, it can be anisogametes, so it can be oogametes. And in isogametes, we see both the gametes are morphologically similar. In anisogametes, we see the gametes are morphologically unequal in size. Okay. In oogametes, we see the morphologically gametes are unequal, and generally the female is larger one and the male is the smaller one. And those gametes fuse. In chlamydomonas, when the gametes fuse, a particular type of secretion happens, that is agglutinin. A chemical secretion happens, agglutinin, which helps in recognition of the gametes, helps in recognition of the gametes. Okay. So generally the gametes fuse, and in the anterior portion, you might be thinking in which portion? Generally in anterior areas where the flagella are there, generally in anterior portion they fuse. Anterior portion, let me write, anterior portion. Generally in anterior portion they fuse. So by this process, the sexual reproduction is carried out by the fusion of the two gametes and giving rise to zygote, and those zygote then again goes the process of from the diploid stage, it again forms meiosis, and after meiosis they give rise to 4 gametes, again haploid gametes, which again give rise to the initial plant. Okay. In algae you will see most of their form is haploid form. So here algae follows haplontic type of life cycle. Isogametes, as I was telling you before, isogamous. Okay. Isogamous means the gametes are similar in size. If they have the gametes, each gametes, okay. In isogametes, we see the gametes are similar in size. In anisogametes, we see the gametes are dissimilar in size. Okay. Anisogamy. In oogamous, we generally see the female is larger one and male is the smaller one. Female is the larger one and male is the smaller one. Female is larger one and male is smaller one. Clear? Okay. In algae, after the gametes fusion, fertilization process is over, zygote is produced, and zygote, as you know, it is a diploid stage, and after the diploid stage of the zygote, they come under meiosis. Okay, they go under meiosis, and after meiosis, haploid zygotes are produced. Generally, those zygote within the thick wall, they are generally called as zoomeospores, and from those haploid structure, the complete haploid plant body is formed. Okay. So in algae, you see most of their stays, in algae you see most of their stays are in haploid form, N form. Only the zygote stage is to N form. So in algae, we see most of their stage is in haploid form. That's why their cycle is haplontic cycle. They have haplontic life cycle. That's why they have haplontic life cycle. Clear? Let's see about the economic importance of algae. Let's see about the economic importance of algae. How? Why we are reading about algae and how algae are useful to us, how algae in this plant, in this variety of plants, they are helping us, and how if we extract algae from some area and what we will do with that, and in which cases they will help us. Let us see about their importance. Let us see about their economical as well as ecological importance. Okay. Algae are useful to man in variety of ways. Half of the total carbon dioxide fixation on earth is carried out by algae through photosynthesis. Okay, as algae are plants, so they can synthesize their own food, so they can perform photosynthesis. If they will perform photosynthesis, then what they will do? They will take carbon dioxide from the habitat, carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and in return they will give us the oxygen. So, they will take carbon dioxide, as carbon dioxide is needed for the photosynthesis process, for the process of photosynthesis. So, they will take what? They will take carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and in return they will provide us the oxygen. So, when the oxygen, okay, when they will provide us oxygen, then what it will do? Then it will cool the atmosphere. Okay. So, oxygen is beneficial for the living organisms. Without oxygen we won't be able to survive. That is why oxygen is very much essential gas for us. So, essential and life saving gas for us. So, that is why we need oxygen. As algae will grow, then it will clean our environment. It is very ecologically helpful. Half of the total carbon dioxide fixation on earth is carried out by algae through photosynthesis. Being photosynthetic, they increase the level of dissolved oxygen in the immediate environment. It will be helpful to the fish, it will be helpful to the aquatic organisms which are inside, residing there inside the aquatic habitat. Though they are residing in the aquatic habitat, they also need the oxygen to survive. So, those oxygen they also get from the algae. And how algae give oxygen to the aquatic organisms? By the process of the photosynthesis. They are of paramount importance as primary producer of the energy rich compounds which form the basis of the food cycle of all aquatic organisms. As we have studied about the food chain, okay, generally in food chain what we will study? Whether it is land ecosystem or whether it is aquatic ecosystem. Generally plants are the main producers. Okay, whenever we study about aquatic ecosystem, whenever we will study about the aquatic ecosystem, okay, whether it is land or aquatic, plants are the main producers. There we study three categories: producers, primary consumers, and secondary consumers. So, in aquatic organisms also, in aquatic habitat also, in aquatic ecosystem also, producers are plants or algae. Okay. And this algae is eaten by the primary consumer. It might be fish, small fish. Okay, it might be small fish, and these small fish are eaten by the large fish. So, the large fish are the secondary consumers. Large fish are the secondary consumers. So, whether it is aquatic ecosystem or whether it is land ecosystem, generally plants are the primary producers. So, in aquatic ecosystem also, algae play a great role in the producer or primary producer community. They are also the paramount importance of the primary producers. In the food chain, generally they play the role of the primary producer in the food chain. Okay, there are also some algae, for example, Porphyra, Laminaria, Sargassum. Among the algae, okay, they can directly, they are edible, so they can directly use as food or in salads. Okay, so they are edible, they can also be used as food. Okay, there are also some marine organisms, brown or red algae, which have the water holding capacity. Okay, what they are water holding substance, they have the water holding substance, that's why they are called hydrocolloids. For example, some brown algae, for example your kerasin red algae. Okay, there is also another algae which is agar. There is also another algae which is agar, which is helpful in preparing ice creams, in jellies. Okay, for example your Xylidium gracilaria, they are useful in preparation of ice creams or jellies. Do you know what is agar agar? Agar agar is used in tissue culture process. In tissue culture generally they won't use the soil, and rather than that they use what, jelly like substances. Iodine, there is also another algae which is used in iodine formation, that is laminaria, it is one type of brown algae. Okay, chlorella and spirulina, they are also unicellular algae which are taken by the space travelers as a food supplement, so they can survive there without heavy food for a longer period of time. So these chlorella and spirulina is used, okay, instead of a food supplement. Okay, and this much. Next we will study in our next class about the complete classification of the algae. We studied about their general features, we studied about their habitat, about their cell structure, about their reproduction, as well as about their economic importance. And last, and a broad category, that is plant classification, that is classification of algae on the basis of their pigments, we will study in our next session. Till then, revise and bye. Goodbye.